happens when a regional casino stops advertising? I once joined a casino where this exact decision had already been made. A bigger, newer competitor had entered the market sometime before my arrival, and by the time I got there, the property had entirely stopped advertising in its key feeder market. When I started asking questions, the answer I got back was too expensive. The logic wasn't hard to follow. That feeder happened to be a top 10 media market, meaning the buys were not cheap. The casino was the last in the competitive set. The audience in that market would see the new competitors advertising regardless. Why pay top 10 rates to whisper next to someone who could afford to shout? I disagreed. My instinct was that there was an audience in that market who would feel more comfortable at our smaller, more familiar property. People who didn't want the cavernous newness and valued the experience we already delivered. They did not need us to outspend the new competitor. They needed us to keep showing up so they would remember we were there. I had to force the buy, but within weeks, revenue from that market began climbing. That is the case for not making the cut. Across decades and categories, the research says the same thing. Welcome to Drive Time Marketing. Hi there, and welcome back to Drive Time Marketing, the show where we help casino marketers turn strategy into action and insights into impact. I'm Julia Carcamo, and today we're talking about something that's like a knife to my heart. What happens when we stop advertising? There's a quiet math in going dark. Nielsen's marketing mix models quantify this. Brands that go off air lose roughly 2% of their long-term revenue every quarter the lights stay off. When they finally resume, it takes 3 to 5 years to recover the equity losses caused by that decision. Read those two numbers together. The damage compounds while you're gone, and the repair takes years after you return. The accounting savings in the quarter you cut are not the real number. The real number is what it costs you to restore your brand back to where it was. And here's the number that should land even harder. Kantar ran a controlled A/B test on a beer brand to isolate this exact effect. Cutting marketing spend by 50% led only to a 1% drop in long-term sales. Not bad. Cutting it by 100%, going completely dark, produced a 13% drop. The damage is not proportional to the cut. It happens at the cliff, when the brand disappears from the market entirely. Reducing some is not the same as eliminating altogether. For any operator forced into a budget conversation, that distinction is the one to hold on to. For a regional casino, this matters more than in almost any other category. Your competition isn't theoretical. It's 26 miles to the east. Your customers don't have to choose between you and them. They already visit both. The question is which property gets the next visit and the one after that. When you go quiet, that decision becomes easier for them and easier for your competitor. And now we've watched this movie before. The pattern is so consistent across decades that the research bores on tedium. During the 1990-91 recession, McDonald's significantly cut its advertising and promotion budget. Pizza Hut and Taco Bell did the opposite. By the end of the period, Pizza Hut sales were up 61%, Taco Bell's were up 40%, and McDonald's were down 28%. Same economy, same consumers, different decisions about whether to keep showing up. The cuts during the 2008 recession hit hardest in the very channels regional casinos rely on most. Newspaper ad spend dropped 27%. Radio fell 22%. Magazine spend was down 18%. The brands that kept advertising through that period came out of the downturn with more share than they had going in. The ones that cut spent the recovery years trying to claw back what they had given up. During COVID, Coca-Cola cut its advertising investment by 35%, roughly $2 billion from its communication budget. Pepsi kept advertising. Coke's revenues fell 11%, while Pepsi's grew 5%. Same category, same conditions, different outcomes. A McGraw-Hill study tracks 600 companies across 16 industries during the 1980-85 recession and the years that followed. Brands that maintained or increased advertising grew sales by 256% by 1985 compared to those that pulled back. You can dismiss any single example as a special case. The pattern is harder to argue against. When competitors go quiet, the brands that keep showing up take the share every time. And regional properties are especially exposed. A destination casino can weather a quiet quarter. Its customers are flying in from across the country and making infrequent, deliberate trips. The decision cycle is long, giving the brand impression time to recover. A regional property doesn't have that buffer. Your customers visit weekly, sometimes twice. They decide on a Friday afternoon without thinking much about it. The decision is quick and habitual. Habit is built or broken by who's in front of them when they form it. Your drive time radius is finite. You could expand into new geography to offset share loss in your current market, but it would take you time and money. Every visit your competitor wins from your established base is one you cannot easily replace by reaching someone new. Advertising in this context is not a luxury. It's the mechanism that keeps your property in the consideration set when the regular guest decides where to go tonight. You can stop showing up in their drive time, on their phone, and in their feed, but you're not saving money. You're handing your competitor the next 12 months of their visits. Most regional casino marketers can cite the return on direct mail to the decimal. That's not the problem. The problem is what it gets compared to. When the direct mail line shows a clean return and advertising line shows softer results, the natural instinct is to put more weight on the channel that has proven itself. But direct mail measures the trip it triggered with an offer. It does not measure the trip that happened because a guest saw your billboard on the way to work, was reminded you exist, and decided on Friday to come by. That trip still shows up in your numbers. It shows up in a different line. Modern measurement makes this more visible than ever. Marketing mix modeling, brand lift studies, and attribution platforms now exist and work. But even the best measurement still undercredits the long arc of brand building because awareness compounds slowly and the payoff is asymmetric. You do not notice the visits brand advertising created. You notice the ones it did not, 6 months after you stopped. So the real question is not whether advertising can be measured. It can, and you should hold your marketing team to a high standard. There's also a quieter dynamic worth noting: share of voice. Your brand spending as a share of the total category spending has a long, well-documented relationship with share of market. Brands whose share of voice exceeds their share of market tend to gain ground over time, and brands below it tend to lose ground. The point most operators miss is when a competitor cuts, your share of voice rises automatically even if your spend doesn't change. The denominator just got smaller. Going dark gives that mechanic away. Worse, it hands it to the property down the road. The real question is how much of your share you're willing to hand to your competitor by going quiet. Across decades and categories, the research gives a clear answer: more than the budget line you would save. For most regional properties, the better move is not to cut advertising, it's to spend it smarter. Make sure every dollar reaches the right drive time radius and does the right job for the right moment in the guest decision cycle. There's almost always efficiency to be found in the spend. There's almost never a clean win in disappearing. Advertising is an invitation. When you stop inviting, people don't sit at home. They go where they're invited. Every regional casino marketer I know can name the property down the road that would be happy to host them. Thanks for joining me on this week's edition of Drive Time Marketing.